Hello, and welcome to the Institute for Transformational Thinking. I'm Ben Decker, the Director of Education here at the Institute, and I'm honored to be presenting this very special online seminar, Be the Change, a luminary discussion on collective transformation. The title, Be the Change, of course, is inspired by Gandhi's famous quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." We have two extraordinary teachers joining us today. First, we have Ora Nadrich. She is the founder and president of the Institute for Transformational Thinking. She is a thought coach, a mindfulness meditation teacher, and author of Says Who? How One Simple Question Can Change the Way You Think Forever. Hello, Ora.
Hello, Ben. Thank you so much for moderating.
My pleasure. Next, we have Marianne Williamson. Marianne is an internationally acclaimed lecturer and author of 14 books, including the mega bestseller, A Return to Love. She is a former congressional candidate, the founder of Project Angel Food, the co-founder of the Peace Alliance, and is now on the Love America Tour, articulating an evolutionary wave of new possibility as principles of higher consciousness are brought to bear on our politics. Thank you so much for joining us, Marianne.
Thank you so much for having me.
And of course, welcome to our students and participants to this very special online seminar on collective transformation, Be the Change. Let's get started now. Now, we would like to hear from both of you, Marianne and Ora, on each of the three areas we're covering today. 1, staying sane in a world that seems crazy. 2, overcoming fear and accessing your innate potential. And 3, the world-changing power of transformational thinking. Let's get started. Staying sane in a world that seems crazy. Ora, you have a Huffington Post article with a similar title. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure, but first of all, I want to say I'm so excited to have Marianne here with us today. Marianne, so great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ora.
You know, I wrote How to Keep Sane in a World That Seems Crazy in 2013. And we had a completely different administration back then. There was plenty going on in the world that seemed crazy at that time, which basically inspired me to write that article. But it has only escalated since then. We still have the same problems. They haven't gone anywhere. And it only seems as if new problems are being added to them daily. We still have mass shootings. We still have nothing being done with gun control. We still have climate disruption, which is now being fully denied. And we still have things like ethnic cleansing going on in other countries and a huge refugee crisis. And the problems, as we know, go on and on and on. So is building a wall one of our solutions? I don't see how anything is going to change unless we change our thinking, which is why I'm so driven and passionate about my Institute for Transformational Thinking. As Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. This, for me, comes down to each and every one of us taking responsibility for our thoughts, meaning we have to change our thinking. For there to be the change we want to see in the world, as the Gandhi quote you said, starting this off, nothing will change unless we change our limited thinking. As far as how we keep sane in the midst of the ongoing craziness we're witnessing, we have to do things like check in with our conscience daily. That means we check in with our thinking mind daily. We have to check in with how awake and present are we. We have to check in with how proactive we are. We have to check in with how compassionate we are. How do we not stand idly by and just accept what we know in our hearts is terribly wrong? Clearly, so much of our thinking has not served us well. And how much longer do we want to keep our unhealthy and inefficient thinking habits, our bad thinking habits, making faulty decisions for us? And when is it too late to wake up from this slumber we're in? Just like it was too late to act on what was obvious in Nazi Germany. What do do we think will change unless we change the thinking that is no longer working for us? So, the question, how do we stay sane in a world that seems crazy? We check in with our minds daily. That means we check in with our thinking daily to make sure that our thoughts are as healthy, balanced, lucid, responsible, and as sane as they can be.
Do you want to chime in on that, Marianne?
Well, of course, I agree with everything that Ora just said. From a spiritual perspective, as articulated by Buddha, Course in Miracles, and books like that, the world itself is insane. And that's where you begin, with the realization that the world as we know it is not a place that you can just fix, because the world itself is the screen onto which are projected the thoughts that we're thinking, much as Ora is saying. So you can't try to work on the world to make the world more peaceful. You start with the realization that as long as our thoughts are peaceful, the world in which we live will not be, just like Ora was saying. Now, I agree with the traditions that give the answer to no matter what you ask of that sort, meditate, meditate, meditate. Because the deepest level, when we meditate, we actually transition from the brain waves that dominate our thinking most of the time in this world to a completely different set of brain waves, the kind of change in thinking, everything Ora is saying. So prayer, meditations, all of the techniques that she was talking about become the being that precedes any effective doing. We all want to find peace, and we all want to make the world more peaceful. But once you realize that, number one, the world itself is just a projection of our thoughts, and number two, that everything we do is infused with the nature of our consciousness. You know, the consciousness with which I do something is embedded in what it is that I do. So the reason we have to be the change is because until we are the change, the world will not fundamentally change. And I think that this is a huge understanding, because it means that we're beginning to look at the world itself the way many of us have already been schooled in looking at our own individual lives. And that is to realize if there's a crisis, if there's a problem out there, there's a challenge for me to change in here, where I need to evolve. And so everything that's happening in terms of the insanity, the things that Ora was mentioning, all of the domestic and international stress points, are all reflections of the fact that humanity is standing at a crossroads. If we stay embedded in the same kind of thinking that brought us to this point, we are increasingly moving towards that point where, as the Course in Miracles says, there's a limit beyond which we can miscreate. We all learned as children about evolution, and we learned that if a species gets to the point where its behavior is maladaptive for its survival, it will either mutate or it will go extinct. And in all the ways that Ora mentioned, we are now, as a human race, behaving in ways that are maladaptive for our survival. When she mentioned climate change denial, climate change denial makes our behavior maladaptive for our survival on this earth. The fact that we are so violent with each other and so spiritually behind our ability to destroy each other makes us increasingly, our behavioral patterns, maladaptive for survival on this earth. Now, the great spiritual and religious avatars represent the mutation. That's what a Buddha represents. That's what a Jesus represents, and so forth. People who have actualized the potential for enlightenment that exists inside us all. And that's what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is where, as the Course in Miracles says, we have surrendered and dismantled and unlearned the thought system that now dominates the world and accepts another one. And the tools, there's one truth spoken in many different ways, but all forms of meditation, prayer, all serious spiritual paths are exactly that. Lessons in how to unlearn the insane thinking of this world, because this insane thinking will lead to our destruction if we allow it to. And I think that that's where we really, I think, for those of us involved in this conversation, in the way that all of us are, I think that it's important that we point out the critical nature and urgency of this point. You know, one of the things you probably heard me talk about is how in our transformational community, I noticed that we're very sophisticated about drugs and alcohol. We tend to be very much in the conversation from AA, etc., that we know that if somebody is not on top of the fact that they are addicted, if in fact they are addicted to drugs or alcohol, if this pattern is not interrupted, it could kill them. That's why people have interventions when people that we love, you know, are drinking or drugging too much. You know, we go, wait. That's when you call a friend. You say, should we mount an intervention? You say that when you realize this is going too far, and if this doesn't stop, they could die. They could overdose. They could die. They could, you know, be really drunk and get on the road and kill somebody. I think that that's where we are with the human race, and I think that our community is having. It's not even that we're having the conversation. We've always had the conversation because this is our conversation about the change in thinking that is required. But I think we're moving now into really being the clarion calls, a realization of the extreme danger represented by thinking that is now maladaptive for the survival of our species. That's why our meditating in the morning is as important as anything else we do, because it will help determine who we are in the space of whatever it is we do. You know, life is not just about what happens to us. It's about who we are in the space of what happens to us. So right now, we're all being assaulted by this chaos. We're all being assaulted by this craziness like Ora was talking about. She wrote a book in 2013. It's now 2018, and things are only worse. So we're all assaulted by it day in and day out. So our becoming people who can absorb the assault and actually ourselves become transformers of it is very different than we're going to go just be activists. Activism is important, but it's got to be a new kind of activism where the work on who I am while I do it is as important as what it is I do. So everything that Ora said, and the meditate, pray, and you do all the stuff that she was talking about, checking in with your conscience. I know in my life, it's been, you know, sometimes we like to think that spiritual progress works in a straight line. And I know one of the things that I've been seeing in my own life that's been very difficult for me over the last year are some issues within myself that I didn't even think I had. It's enough that I was working on the issues I knew I had. But now either, I don't know, maybe I had them and I didn't know it, or they were never triggered before, whatever. So I'm very aware, and I think we all are, that this personal growth work goes on at the same time. How do I heal the world, and how do I heal myself? It's a both and. That yin and yang, there are a lot of hours in the day. So we meditate and we're politically active, for instance. It's a big both and I think our community has that template. And that's why conversations like we're having today are so important.
Yeah, I want to jump in for a minute, because what Marianne is saying, you know, I love that you said that, Marianne, because, you know, self-reflection is an ongoing thing. It doesn't stop. You know, I'm amazed when I tell people about, you know, my book says who, and they say what it's about, what is it about? I say it's about transforming negative and fear-based thoughts. And there's this big pause, and they say, oh my God, it's so much work to be self-aware all the time. It's so much work. You know, there's always this exasperation of like, oh my God, it's just so much work to constantly work on ourselves. And you know what? Yeah, it is a lot of work. And you know what?
Exercise, you never get to stop.
It never stops. And when I hear that, you know, it makes me realize that, look, left to our own devices, is everybody chomping at the bit to exercise? Is everybody chomping at the bit to do things that are more demanding of them and more arduous? And, you know, when it comes to self-reflecting and really knowing who we are, knowing thyself, when I see people that are just, you know, not even extremists in behavior, I mean, these are solid, smart, intelligent people, and they're the ones that are saying to me, oh, but it's so much work. It's just so hard. So I want to say, you know, with mindfulness, as a mindfulness teacher, you know, with that seeping into the mainstream, I feel more hopeful being on the cover of Time and Newsweek, and you citing the importance of meditation and prayer. And, you know, the fact that I know I work with a lot of people that are, you know, receptive to meditation, those that are not. And I say, even if it means taking 10 minutes just to be self-reflective, just to be a word that we don't even hear anymore, contemplative, whether you're quieting your mind or you're observing your mind, find time in your day to do that. It's important. We need to not only be quiet and silence ourselves and get still, but we also need to spend time looking at our thoughts more closely and understanding our thinking mind better. It's really important for us. And this, it's too much work, you know, attitude, I think we need to look at that a little bit more closely. I just love that you brought up very honestly and saying, you, Marianne, who's this incredible, you know, world-renowned figure, is still working on herself, and you're sharing that with us.
Well, it's very much like physical exercise. If you, on any given day, aren't working at making your muscles strong, they're becoming weaker. If you're not working on keeping it up, it's headed down. That's not only with your physical muscles, but also with your thinking.
Right.
Emotional and psychological and spiritual gravity, just as there's physical gravity, and the forces of the world would take you down. I think that you get to the point, you know, when you're young, you just don't have to work it so much. And as you get older, you realize I can either have a flabby body or I can have a strong and toned body. It's just not even a question anymore. And I think that when you look at the state of the world, you were talking about smart, intelligent people. Well, I think we're changing our concept of what smart, intelligent means. Because some of the quote-unquote smart, intelligent people let us into this mess. You know, when you look at everything going on right now, many of the people pulling the levers of power are very educated people in businesses. So I think we're changing our idea of what, you know, it's some of what we call smart, intelligent people are the kind of the people we need to not be so much listening to right now.
Right.
In the Course in Miracles, it says love restores reason and not the other way around. So there are many people that think of themselves and that society until recently would call the quote unquote smart and intelligent people, who would say that we were naive to think that prayer, meditation, contemplation, reflection are really so essential to what happens, because they are still, their worldview, their mental filter is still very mechanistic, very 20th century. What we now realize is they're naive.
Right.
They're naive to think that a worldview which is disconnected from the heart, which is disconnected from a deeper human intelligence and wisdom, that is stuck only in a small part of the brain, which they think is so intellectual, but really isn't if it doesn't include love, because once again, love restores reason. They're naive to think that we can continue this way. So I think that really smart, intelligent people now, including many of them, realize the direction we're going is straight for the iceberg. The direction we're going is straight to the real, if not a definite possibility, but an increasing probability of some level of global catastrophe beyond anything that our civilization could absorb. So I think now, anybody who says it's so much work is really not a smart, intelligent person. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And you're absolutely right. I mean,
smart, intelligent people know now.
Yes.
If we don't meditate, as the Dalai Lama said, in order to save the world, we must have a plan, but no plan will work unless we meditate.
That's right. But it's interesting, with it becoming much more, available and in the mainstream, again, citing mindfulness, we are requiring this of ourselves. More and more people, it is growing out in the world. I love seeing that people are having a awareness of these, for a lot of reasons, is to reduce stress, and rightfully so. But the requirements that we have, the self-care requirements that we have for ourselves, you know, having the ability to be self-aware, having the ability to be self-reflective, having the ability to go within. And yet we tolerate and allow and even condone people in positions, and I know this can go into a whole direction if we're not careful, in a political direction, and that's more in your wheelhouse, that is not required of them. That is absolutely just not required of them. You know, it's a real stretch to say we would hope that, you know, perhaps a president would meditate, but we know the value that it has in our lives and how necessary it is for growth and evolving and self-realization. And yet we let people lead that absolutely do not do that at all.
Well, I think we need to be a little careful there, because we really don't know what people are doing. I've known people in very high positions of.
Well, I don't want to do a gross generalization, but I'm saying self-reflection.
Well, yeah, hold on. I think that I don't think we want to contribute to what is really this sort of generalized vilification of people, for instance, in politics, based on this assumption that they don't read the same books that we do, or do the same meditation practices. I think that a lot of spiritual work is, in many people's minds, much like AA. You don't necessarily want to tell people what you're doing. Not everybody is out about doing books even like the Course in Miracles. And that's where I've seen so much, you know, and would feel, for instance, in my work with them, very kind of betrayed if I were to say it, and I understand why. So I think when it comes to someone like the president, I think it's fair to say he's not meditating. It doesn't seem. And so I understand your general point, but I also think, much as you said, this change is occurring. And I think in some of the places, we might be surprised.
I'm hopeful, and I'm hopeful based on what we practice. I can only go by what I practice, which brings me back to the point of how I look at my own thinking mind, how I am connected to my own thought processes, how I am connected to my own conscience daily. I can only go by that. I mean, I am one connected to the collective, and what I do will reverberate out into the world. So that for me, if I can be hopeful for what I can aspire to do, then I can hope that others want to aspire to that for themselves.
Well, not only that, it's that all minds are joined.
Right.
So when we do deepen our thought processes, when we do meditate, we have a subconscious influence on those around us. When we have meditated, when we have prayed, when we have blessed people before we even go into the meeting, we have an invisible and subconscious influence on everyone there. You know, it's not just that they see something in us and go, wow, you know, you have a piece made, you know, and I would love some of that. It's beyond even that. It's the invisible influence that we have.
Absolutely.
That's why so much of the the change that's happening, and this is always true in systems changing, but you really see it today. The social axis of deep change is not horizontal, it's vertical. It's not about dumbing down messages so that more people agree with you on a position, let's say politically. It's about all of us digging deep in the ways that you're talking about here, and knowing that that creates a resonant field of possibility.
Absolutely, yes.
The Course in Miracles says an idea is stronger when it is shared. That's why programs like you're doing here, this is why your institute, this is why any of this kind of work is so important. And I think that in our work within the transformational community, we are finally beginning to not only recognize that, but take it into our conversation more, that there is something that happens not just when you meditate, but when you meditate with others.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to go to a meditation class. That's why, you know, In the old days, I noticed when I lecture at old churches and stuff, in the old days, those churches were so big and those synagogues were so big and the mosques today are so big because people joined. There is something very powerful about being in a room filled with like-minded people.
Yes.
A lot of what's going on today is not only that we're individually doing this work, but that we're doing it together in ways that are creating a greater field of possibility for everyone.
Absolutely. And that really brings us back to recognizing the hopefulness of all of this. So, yeah.
I agree with you.
Yes.
So let's, that kind of takes us right to our second point, overcoming fear and accessing your innate potential. Marianne, one of your most famous quotes is from A Return to Love. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure.
You know, I want to go back for a moment to what Ora just said about hope. And the reason that the resonant field created by meditation and prayerfulness and reflection and so forth is hopeful is because it takes you into a realm beyond time and space. That's why the Course in Miracles says miracles, which is that shift in perception, collapse time. It takes you beyond the time continuum as we understand it. So there is always hope within that space because there's infinite possibility available to us. The miracle is that power to override the devolutionary lure of fear-based thinking, to supersede it, to overcome it. And that's where spirituality and religion and all of this conversation brings in possibility to the world today that the old mind, that which is just a relic of 20th century mechanistic secularized thinking, cannot give us. Now, in terms of actualizing our divine potential, I'm reminded of a line in A Course in Miracles where Jesus says, I don't have anything you don't have. I just don't have anything else. I am in a state which is potential within you. And that's what the great avatars and enlightened masters are. They have actualized a state which is potential within all of us. I love the story about Michelangelo. Michelangelo said that when he went to the quarry, the way he saw it, God had already created the statue. His job was just to get rid of the excess marble. So that perfect being is already within each of us. It was created by God. We don't have to make it. We can't make it. What enlightenment is a process of unlearning, dissolving, burning through all those pieces, layers of accumulated illusion and fear which sit on top of our true selves. Part of it is that as we meditate, a lot of the energy dissolves of itself. Part of it is that painful detox process where it's like the universe shines a light on our problematical areas, our character defects. It comes up for review. And we have to admit, oh my God, I was not honest there. I was jealous there. I was, not impeccable. And to see that within ourselves. And then we're at a point where recognizing it as a detox is where you simply say, I get that I was that way in this situation. I atone for that mistake. I see this part of myself and I ask God to take it from me. What we don't want to do is stay stuck in that old paradigm of I have to work it out. Let me tell you something. I have aspects of my personhood where I could go on for hours about how I got it from mommy or daddy. That does not move the needle. I'm sorry. That has not helped me. That has not helped me. It's given me insight, aid, but it doesn't take it away. I always say no matter where you got it, it's yours now. What takes it away is really admitting the nature of our character defects, as they say in AA. Really recognizing it and asking whatever your concept is of the divine teacher, the Holy Spirit, whatever your wording is, to remove you from that and to remove it, because beneath all that is the true you that's been caged and unable to express itself. We all have those places where, because of wounding, usually in childhood, but not always in childhood, sometimes in our adulthood is when we were abused or wounded or whatever, but those places where, for whatever reason, we go into moments where I don't know how to express my love and get my needs met in this moment. I had a situation couple months ago where I felt panicked. And because I felt panicked and bullied, I went into a place that was not my power. I lied about a situation because I felt I had to protect somebody. Well, it was in that moment of panic, and whatever issues I have, I'm not a liar, but I was that day. I mean, it's silly lies that don't, they're silly, but there were enough to harm a relationship because the other person realized it. But in that moment, I in my panic, and that's what life is about, bringing us situations where, okay, we know you were serene and in your power there, but now we're going to throw you a situation, can you be serene and in your power here? And that's all that life is. All that life is just these lessons rehearsed. And then, when we don't get it right, our job is to atone for those mistakes, recognize them. And in one way or another, they do come back around again, but this is the work of transformation.
Or did you want to chime in?
Yes, I mean, it makes me think of fear, and that fear will come up and we will act accordingly to when we are identified with our fear. And Marianne shared an example of when we go into that reactive state out of fear, we sometimes don't act as our higher self. We all have had that happen, and we'll probably have it happen again. Fear. I have a chapter in my book on fear. I know the question is overcoming fear to access our innate potential. And, in Says Who, I say that our fear-based thoughts keep our fears alive and very real for us. And unless we want to keep those thoughts as our fixed core beliefs, which they will be, unless we challenge and question those fear-based thoughts, they can stay very present for us, and they can even be below the surface. They can be in our subconscious, and it takes something outside of ourselves to trigger us, and then it activates that fear. So I feel, my work is all based on thought transformation and really getting to know our thinking mind well and knowing what our thoughts are. Now, not all of our fear-based thoughts are conscious to us. Even though I say that your thoughts create feelings, which create behavior and creates reality, I also say in Says Who that sometimes our thoughts are not known to us, but we feel the emotion connected to that thought. And we can feel the side effect of a thought and not even know what the thought is that's creating that. But to be specific about overcoming it and accessing our innate potential, we need to change those fear-based thoughts by questioning and challenging them to find out if they're even real or not, or to find out if they're serving our well-being or if they're not. And if they're not serving our well-being, we have no use for them. I feel that we can't access our innate potential by allowing our negative and fear-based thoughts to undermine us, and they will. They will continue to undermine us, to sabotage us, and not help us reach our full potential. And, instead, we need thoughts that cultivate positive, wholesome thinking that supports the best of who we are. Our potential needs to be nurtured and encouraged. It's a very delicate thing. It's like a flower. We want to nurture it. We want to encourage it. And in order for that to happen, our thoughts need to be aligned with our deepest desires. Our thoughts need to support the very things that we want to do. Our thoughts need to support us realizing our full potential. We not only can access our potential with the thoughts that we tell ourselves, but we can fully realize our potential and live it successfully out in the world with the work that we do. There is great potential in all of us, just waiting to be realized.
In A Course in Miracles, it says that fear is to love what darkness is to light. That fear is not a thing in itself. It is merely the absence of light. And darkness, excuse me, fear is not a thing in itself. It's merely the absence of love. The way darkness is not a thing of itself. It's merely the absence of light. So you don't hit darkness with a baseball bat. You turn on the light and the darkness is automatically gone. So what the Course in Miracles says, which is, there's some difference there, is the Course in Miracles says you can't analyze fear away. That you turn on the love and the fear is not there. For instance, when you just said Ora, and you absolutely correctly, in that moment when I was on that phone call with that person, I got scared. He was asking me about someone he was angry at, and I felt I needed to protect her. And I felt bullied, and I panicked, and my intentions were correct. I needed to protect her, and I was afraid. Now, from a Course in Miracles perspective, the problem there, or the technique, there's just different things to look at, is not for me to figure out what my fear-based thoughts are. My issue was I didn't pray before that phone call. If I had taken 5 minutes, first of all, I'm not sure I wasn't acting on an addictive appetite, even returning that call, to be honest. I think if I prayed, should I call him? I'm not sure I would have gotten yes. Number two, if I had just prayed, may I be an instrument of God's peace. If I'd spent 5 minutes, first of all, would I have even made the phone call? I don't remember praying and asking if I should. If I had blasted him with love and prayed only to be an instrument of peace, then if I had gotten internal guidance to make the call, my nervous system would have been completely different. So from a Course in Miracles perspective, it's not about just my figuring it out. Because you know what? I've read every book about it. I understand my addictive appetite to that person. But you know what? That has not healed me. It has given me some insight. But what has healed me when I practice it is remembering I am only here to be an instrument of God's love, to bless him, and that's where the connecting link between the prayer and the meditation comes in. So it's not about just identifying my darkness, it's about identifying with the light. And and that's where you connect the prayer, you connect the meditation to those situations. I'm very clear. I didn't pray before that call. I didn't meditate before that call. I didn't set myself within my higher ground of being before the call. And because I didn't do that, my ego default positions, I was totally vulnerable to them. Because in the absence of my proactive intention to be an instrument of God's love there, then everything in me that is mind used another way set in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, the whole thing to me is about how we become so available to connect to our truth.
Well, yeah, but that's what religion is. Religion it comes from a Latin word which means to bind back. And I'm not talking about dogma or doctrine or institutionalized religion, but I am talking about that place where we recognize that it is only with the help of a higher power that we can ultimately transcend these things. That's what A Course in Miracles says. At the highest level, psychotherapy and religion are their same thing. I know that I can't just think myself out of this stuff.
Yeah, of course.
I've thought a lot, and I've read a lot, and I've kind of read every book on the topic, but I know that, it's interesting, the metaphysics of the idea of Jesus as Savior. And I'm not Christianity is not my religion, and I understand a very, very different metaphysics to that. But the idea of salvation, the only thing to be saved from is our own insanity. And sometimes I really get the concept that I cannot save myself. I mean, once I'm off and running in insane behavior, that's why meditation in the morning is so important. If I don't meditate in the morning, and I've asked myself about that call, did I not meditate that day? Well, I think I did meditate. But because it's an area of my life where I have my own fear-based issues, I needed to meditate before that call and pray before that call.
Yeah.
So in those places where it's hardest, we can't just do it by ourselves. And that's very much, whether it's Course in Miracles, whether it's AA, this idea that there is a power in us but not of us that can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Because there's some situations where I could write a book about my fear and ego, but I've lived enough to know that alone, Marianne can't fix Marianne.
Yeah. I find it helpful, that whole notion of self-awareness and really, look, I do really love that quote, that Pierre de Teilhard Chardin quote, are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we're going to have those moments where, again, we're not, the highest vibration of our spiritual wisdom isn't always right there in the foreground of the words that are about to leave our mouth. And I find what's helpful, yes, meditation. I'm a meditator. I've been meditating for over 35 years. Starting my day doing what I call thought alignment, making sure that my thoughts are very much aligned with my truth, my intention, and my purpose. And so that my actions really reflect that. Yes, are we going to be caught off guard? Absolutely. Are we going to be ill prepared? Absolutely. But the idea of knowing when something doesn't feel right, I need to pay attention to that. I need to pay attention to when I'm about to talk to somebody, when I'm about to act, when I'm about to do something, and something doesn't feel right, which brings back to the self-inquiry, to the connectedness to self, to knowing what's going on within. How am I checking in with myself to find out why do I feel so? Why do I feel so anxious? Why do I feel so uncomfortable right now? The more we can connect to what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and open up ourselves expansively to allow for that divine spirit guidance that I believe you're talking about, is being open. Just allowing ourselves to be open to all of it. Well, I want to be an open vehicle to all of it.
For me, it's very helpful, though, to know there's only one. The Course in Miracles says you think you have many different problems, but you really only have one. And that is your separation from God. So the bottom line, why do I feel this way? Because I'm not thinking like God. I mean, I can go, I'm thinking this, I'm upset because blank, 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 blank. For me, all that knowing doesn't get me out of it. The Course in Miracles says the purpose of your life is to think like God thinks. And to think like God thinks means, when you were talking about the Teilhard de Chardin just now, that you are a spirit. If in every situation, the issue is, who am I and why am I here? And if I'm upset, I can analyze it all I want, but it's real simple. You're not here only for love. You have an agenda. You have an intention. You're making it about you. You're doing something other than thinking like God. And if you will move into the light, to move into the light means, okay, I give up, or at least I'm willing. I love how in the Course in Miracles it talks about your good intentions are not enough, but your willingness is everything. I am willing to think like God would think in this situation, which means I am only here to be helpful. I am only here to love. It's one thing, and I certainly agree with you, there's a difference between transcendence and denial. I'm not saying that we should give no thoughts to analyzing, the fear and where we come from. But I see some people staying stuck in the analysis of darkness and not moving into a more proactive, conscious, willing, and intentional embrace of the light. And that is as much work. And the ego actually loves, remember, the ego loves to talk about the negative, even under the guise of self-awareness. But the work of actually saying, I am willing, here where I'm being weak, I am willing to be strong. Now, everybody has their different traditions. In Judaism, it's the covenant of Israel. And in Christianity, it's Jesus. In Buddhism, it's the Buddha mind. I mean, I think there's many truths spoken in many different ways. But the idea, like in the New Testament, when Jesus says, he says, I will stand in the breach. which is articulated in the Course in Miracles with his saying, my mind joined with your mind can shine away the ego. So for me, the process is, I get where I'm afraid, I get where I'm messed up, I get where I'm in my weakness. I can't leap across this by myself. Dear God, please help me. And then the issue is impulse control. These days, it's so easy to pick up the phone, so easy to send that text, so easy to send that email before we've reached the point. And this is where I see my own work, Marianne. You don't have to make that call now. You don't have to answer what that post was on your Facebook page. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to put your dukes up. Wait until you have been healed. You just know, you don't even know why you're in your you don't have to analyze your craziness. You've analyzed your craziness for 65 years. Just know you're in your craziness, and you know you're crazy because you're upset, and ask the spirit in whatever language you use to guide you. And to me, that's the 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection. That's the 40 years between the slavery in Egypt and the deliverance to the promised land. You know, I love, you know, when the people talk, the hand of God comes upon you, when you just feel that peace descending on you. And one of the ways that spirit works, and you've been that in my life on more than one occasion.
Thank you.
Where spirit will, if you're open to it in that place, spirit will send you the people to say what you need to hear. You know? And like you've been that way with me in relationship stuff where, Ora, I mean, I'm remembering one conversation you and I had. You didn't help me identify the darkness. You took me right into the light. And that's where I was broken. It was that I needed someone to show me what the light looked like. Show me what sanity in this situation looks like. And that's where I think you are such a high priestess, particularly in the area of love and relationships. Because you stand within that light. And when you articulate that light, I don't care what anybody's darkness is, we're just sort of drawn into the sacred fire of getting it right.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That was so beautiful. I remember a time with you, and I remember the energy, you know, because we know what that feels like. You know, Marianne, I know you and I, we know that feeling. It feels so... I just am thinking of the words that come to mind, you know, it's that divine. It feels like you are in the sphere of the divine. And it is.
If I only could have put you in my pocket, Ora.
I remember.
I needed, and I mean this seriously, I needed a tape of that conversation to play before I went to bed every night. Because when I got out of the room where I was with you, I could practice it sometimes. And really that's...
Okay, listen, my beautiful fellow priestess. You know, when we go to that beautiful divine light. It's so warm. It's so embracing. It's so encapsulating. It is so, I don't know, for me, I think like that's just life and birth and death and all of it wrapped into this big, gorgeous, divine, cosmic hug, you know, and we glimpse it and we glimpse it and we know it and we feel it when we're there, you know. And you know, even when you described about prayer and taking those moments to receive that knowing, you know, and the way you're describing it so beautifully and honestly, and like, you know, because it helps us understand that we will say things and we will do things and we will act before we've allowed ourselves to step into our divine knowing. Do you know? Isn't that one of the biggest challenges of being alive in this body? Like, we're in, we're out. We step, it's what I say about mindfulness. You know, mindfulness is being in the present moment with total awareness. Boom. I'm in the moment, I'm out of the moment. I'm in the past, I'm in the present. I'm in the future. I'm all over the place. You know, we have such a hard time staying in this beautiful present moment of now, the moment that we are most alive in right this minute. And to hold on to that, is that the great learning for us in this incarnation, that we're constantly learning how to stay in that divine knowing?
Well, the universe is intentional. Our enlightenment, our self-actualization is the intention of the universe. And as you were saying at the beginning of this talk between us, the intention is not only having to do with our own individual enlightenment, but with the enlightenment of the human race. So from a miracle-minded perspective, the idea here is that every situation we're in, even the ones that tempt us, are lessons that we need to go through. For instance, let's take that phone call. Well, next time something like that happens, you better believe I'm going to pray before I pick up the phone. So that's how we grow. Now, the Course in Miracles says you're not perfect, or you would not have been born, but it is your mission to become perfect here. And I think if we circle back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, this must happen. This must happen. And things like what I went through with that one situation, it might not seem to have anything to do with world peace, but it does. Because it is a place of my own reactivity or my own addictive mind or whatever, where my healing in that area will help me in everything I do, not just my relationship.
Absolutely. I know that those lessons are gifts, and when they happen, I always remind myself, yes, I aspire to know more. Yeah. I aspire to become
get it right, dear God. Right.
It's like, yes,
freaking learning opportunity.
Yes. One more lesson. Okay. All right.
The really,
it's like,
if we're honest with ourselves, what's so excruciating is that we don't really learn those lessons until they are in situations that we really, really care about.
Right. Yes.
And that's the pain of you. That's the suffering for us, is that we didn't just blow it. We blew it with somebody we really cared about. We didn't just blow that meeting. We blew that meeting with a job we really wanted. And that's the way it happens, because and I'm sure that those same situations had come around with people and situations less important, but our ego was able to say, oh, well, I was right, or, it doesn't matter. And that's why this is such a painful time for a lot of people, because we're all being put through our paces right now. Everybody I know.
Oh,
it's like,
wow.
The universe, and that's because it's as though the universe is saying, you must grow. For the human race to survive, we must grow now.
Absolutely.
We have to really be holding each other's hands right now, really being available to each other, and knowing that we're all burning through our own illusions in order to become the people that collectively we need to be to turn this world around.
Absolutely, Marianne. I just want to add to that. I know Ben wants to get to our final question. And you wrote so beautifully in your book, From Tears to Triumph, with the opioids crisis. And we can't go there because that's going to be a whole other hour. But the pain, going into those depths of the bowels of our discomfort, our pain, our sorrow, it's hard to see, that so many people are choosing to numb it. I'm saying, just hold on.
So true.
Ride this wave, ride it. It's a mother, but you can do it. You can do it. I said to Ben the other day, I said, there are days where you're like holding the side of the raft. Mm-hmm. You're like holding on for dear life, and you see that wave coming and you're like, okay, I am going to try as best as I can to ride this wave, and trust that I am opening myself to being guided to ride it as best as I possibly can.
Well, also I think, and this is what I wrote about in Tears to Triumph, we know with the physical body that there's an immune system. We know that if we are, I'm sorry, I'm with the video and the not video. I don't know why I'm off now, but we know with the physical body, if I am bruised, my body is going to heal. I just need to give it time, and I need to be gentle with my body while it's bruised. Right. I think that we need to realize that the psyche has an immune system too. And that you can ride this wave because the psyche knows how to repair itself, just like the body does.
Yes.
And that's why, and I think that the medicalization of normal human despair is so dangerous because it interrupts the natural psychic immune system, and it makes us foggy at a time when we need to not be foggy. You know, given everything that's happening in the world today, the fact that we're upset about it, the fact that our government is in the hands of climate change deniers, the fact that our government is cutting the EPA budget by 1/4, the fact that the government is cutting by 30 and 40% State Department budgets, things that have to do with international assistance to refugees, to women, to the poor. This should upset us. The fact that you are upset about that stuff is a sign of mental health.
Right.
The fact that we have come up with ways to numb ourselves so as not to have to think about it, that is a sign of lack of mental health.
That's right. That's right. And it's very dangerous. And we need to be as more awake now than ever before. You know, I know, again, going back to, you know, for me, the thing that has always stayed with me and stays with me so raw in my heart about, you know, my father lost his entire family in the Holocaust. And I asked myself over and over again, how could that have happened? How can so many people have been asleep? Now, listen, I know we're bringing up topics that really require so much more careful time and care, but the awakening of now, the awakening of not repeating our mistakes over and over and over again. You know, it is so that, you know, isn't that the LIYZL, you know, if not now, when? Now is the time.
Yeah. So I just want to address our third point real quick. The third point is the world-changing power of transformational thinking. You can keep going.
Well, I think, you know, all these questions basically are the same. They all connect into everything else. I think that I think that's all we've been talking about for the last hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the transformational thing. I mean, you know, now creating this institute, the Institute for Transformational Thinking, IFTT, you know, transformational thinking for me is what inspired all of the great visionaries to actualize what they had envisioned in their own minds, which we have the capacity to do. We've talked about potential. We've talked about so many, you know, areas of the soul and the spirit and who we are. And, you know, what they actualized from what I say is a single seed, a thought that started in their mind and it grew into some of the greatest visions. And we became the beneficiaries of their transformational thinking, whether it was Gandhi or Einstein or Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa or any of the great thinkers throughout history. Were it not for their own, whether it's creative or fearless or whatever you want to call it, their ability, which I believe each and every one of us has, to see things differently, more expansively, more compassionately, the world would not have been changed or transformed in the way it was without them holding those visions in our mind. And we are that powerful. We can change the world with our thoughts. Each and every one of us can be a transformational thinker, a transformational leader, and can help change the world for the better if we want to, if we choose to. These are choices that we can make. These are conscious choices that we can make. And as I say with the Institute for Transformational Thinking, changing the world one thought at a time. That is the true power of transformational thinking. It has the ability, our thinking, our desire for the truth and the light and the divine spirit that we've talked about, Marianne, and God, and all of this gorgeous package that makes up us and the world in which we live in. That is the ability to truly changing us, changing our thoughts, changing the world.
You know, and it's our time. You know, even talking about someone like Martin Luther King, if he were alive today, he'd be 89. He would have earned a well-deserved rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even, you know, one of the things that's always helped me, I love reading biographies of great people. Because when you read biographies of people who've achieved great things, they were just people. You know, they were exactly what we are. They were not enlightened masters necessarily, but they rose to the occasion and they lived courageously in their own time. And I don't think it's just a matter of what we can do, it's a matter of what we must do.
Right, yes.
What the universe is primed for us to do. And I think we need to be, I don't think people need to be convinced right now about the power of changing our thinking, because I think anybody listening to a talk with you and me already kind of get that.
Right.
You know, I mean, Return to Love came out in 19, you know, I mean, this is not news, but that we are joining together.
Right.
And we are holding each other's hand.
Yes.
And doing to increase the conversation.
Yes.
And how we are, as you were saying, changing the world because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledging each other's priesthood and priestesshood.
Right.
I don't think it's not kindergarten anymore.
No.
We all have the toolkit. We all have the lunchbox. We all have, and now I think really recognizing the tremendous contribution that those of us who do have this template and do have the skill set, or do at least even when we don't always have the skill, have the realization that it's the skill we're trying to, you know, to demonstrate.
Yeah, and I love, you know, I've been saying a lot lately, showing up.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about showing up. Just those, you know, it's like there's that feeling you get when we show up for one another. You know, sometimes when you don't even ask, and we show up and we look at each other and we go, "Oh, you're here. Yeah, I'm here. We're here. We're here to do what we can do for each other." And if we all show up, if we all say, "What can I do? I'm here. I'm showing up for this. This is important to me. This matters to me." You know, that makes me feel like if we can all just, you know, extend out our hands and say, "Let's do this. We can do this. We can show up, and we can show up together." And you talked about community, and you talked about these centers, and you talked about these mosques and these churches and these temples. Let's be that. Let's just be all of that together in our showing upness, you know, now.
Right.
Let's show up now.
I'm with you. Okay, we agree. Show up now.
Showing up.
Showing up now. Anything else you wanted to add, Marianne?
No, I really need to show up now for my next meeting, if you want to know the truth.
Fabulous. Thank you both so much for sharing your wisdom with us at the Institute.
Let me say one last thing, because it's her thing. I just want to, hold on. I just want to take this moment, Ora, to acknowledge once again the profundity of your wisdom and your teaching, and to say once again how much I have gained personally, not only from your friendship, but from your counsel. And I'm so happy that you are starting this institute, because I know how much you have to give, and I see in my mind's eye how many people will receive such comfort and inspiration at a very, very deep level. So it's a real honor to have been in this conversation with you, and I wish you the very, very best with all of your work.
Oh, Marianne, thank you so much for being, you know, such a true soul sister. And you are such a trailblazer for myself and millions of other people. Your fearlessness, your courage, your honesty, your wisdom, and you are one of those smart, intelligent people, by the way, for real.
Yeah, but the smart, intelligent, you know, like I said, we're redefining smart and intelligent.
Right, but you know,
there have been some. I might be smart, but I've done some really dumb things.
Okay. I love your humanness. I love you. I love the whole package. I love the whole enchilada. Okay,
thank you, darling.
No, thank you. I love you from the depths of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. And bye, Ben, and bye, Julia. Thank you, everybody, so
much.
Bye.
Thank you all so much. For more information on Marianne Williamson, including upcoming events, lectures, you can visit marianne.com. To learn more about Ora Nadrich, the Institute for Transformational Thinking, the Thought Coach Certification Training Program, please visit theift.org.
I'm very excited through the Institute for Transformational Thinking to offer up my first online program, the Thought Coach Certification Training Program. And this is what we've been talking about. This is really calling all transformational leaders. This is saying, come lead with us. Do you know? Join me for this extraordinary 4-week program where you can begin this incredibly important inquiry of the self to know your thinking mind as well as you possibly can so that you can put transformation into effect first and foremost for yourself, and then become a transformational coach, a thought coach, so that you can be a leader to others and help them awaken to their own thinking mind. It is going to be an incredible journey that we are going to take together on this path of transformational thinking.